Just like the players at spring training, getting up early, getting their work in. Michael wakes up early, goes in his backyard, starts screaming those vocal exercises, right, to get game ready. Guess what else he does? He texted me yesterday, asked me if I was ready. Bob, I had to send him a picture of all the notes I already have ready. So the Yankees haven't played a game since October 30th. It didn't end the way they wanted to. They start the journey again, as Judge just said.
Well, I know I'm sitting here with you guys, but I will not be talking that much. I have to save it for Friday. Could be a couple of C's, you know. I've got to be ready. You know,
we have a good audio guy. You could just whisper everything if you want.
Let's go that route.
Yeah, okay. Sure. By the way, you mentioned that we saw Judge off the top of the show. Let's talk about that a little more. The fact that, interesting that, I mean, they got so close, and that clearly left a lasting impression about not getting that championship trophy.
I found a couple of things interesting that he said, and we played some of those sound bites about being hungrier now than the Yankees were last spring training when they were coming off a year where they didn't make the postseason at all. And I think what Judge is saying is the reality of this matter. Remember, in the moments after the Yankees lost the World Series to the Dodgers, manager Aaron Boone said, this is going to sting, and it's going to sting for a while. And, Michael, the only way you turn that around is getting back there again this season now and trying to, as Judge said, rewrite the script.
And one of the things you have to guard against, which is always a problem, if you get that far and you fall short, now you've got that whole trip to get that far and try to make up for where you fell short. Are you up for that battle? The Yankees are going to obviously be up for the battle. And also, I found it interesting when he said, this hurts more than not making the playoffs. And I said, really? And then I checked in with a buddy of mine, Rick DiPietro, former #1 draft pick for the Islanders. He said, not making the playoffs is terrible, but getting into the playoffs and losing is way worse. He's absolutely right.
And here's the thing, getting all the way to the final hurdle, and Michael, knowing you could have won that World Series. Had you played your brand of baseball, clean baseball, they had a definite shot of beating the Dodgers. There were games they could have won that they lost.
Well, Hal Steinbrenner said it when Meredith interviewed him a couple of weeks ago on Hot Stove, and he said, listen, they weren't I'm not going to say they're a better team, but they were the better team, and we did not play up to our potential. I think that has to stick in their craw. Game 1, they bring in Nestor Cortez, not Tim Hill. Game 5, they have that 5th inning that they'll never forget. No Yankee fan will ever forget either. So they can't feel really good about the way they lost. If they got totally outplayed, I think you almost can accept it. But since you didn't play your best game and you lost, that's what stings.
Right, when you think about a World Series, nobody really remembers the team that lost. They remember the team that won. Even think to the Yankee World Series. If I quizzed you real quickly, 96, 98, 99, 2000, 2009, would you be able to remember the team that they beat every season? So when you get that close, you want to grab the trophy. And Michael said it perfectly. They should have won Game 1. They should have won Game 5. I'm sure they took that into the offseason. And now it's a long journey to try and get yourself back there and turn that around.
And to make it worse, the Dodgers just didn't accept it with grace and class. They have been really digging it in and not letting up at all. That's something the Yankees won't forget. Now, I don't think that comes into play unless you meet the Dodgers again in the World Series. You obviously see them in the 3-game set during the season, but that doesn't matter. But the things that the Dodgers said, if they ever meet the Dodgers again in the Fall Classic, that's bulletin board stuff.
Yeah, Aaron Boone mentioned that as well when he was asked about it. Also want to mention this. The media asked Aaron Judge about Juan Soto, about the fact that he moved on to the Mets, and he said this week he thought the Mets offered a good chance to win, and I think the captain, at the very least, respectfully disagreed with that.
Well, I think that every Yankee feels the same way. Listen, if you want to go to another team that offered you more money or other perks, then you should say that. But to say that the Mets have a better chance to get to the World Series, I would just say, well, look at the league that you're in, and then look at the league that the Yankees are in. And if the Yankees have a Judge and a Soto, and you go through the American League, where the teams are not as stout as the Dodgers, the Braves, the Phillies, even the Diamondbacks, maybe the Padres, you got to get through all of them to get to the World Series if you're the Mets. The Yankees, I think the road's a lot easier for the Yankees to get back to the World Series than for the Mets to get there.
I think Judge gave a very respectful and a very obvious answer. Of course he thinks the Yankees have a better road and are better equipped to get to the World Series. And that's the beauty of baseball. We will see throughout the course of a 162-game season and the postseason who ends up being right. But I think that Judge is also trying to set a tone for the Yankees. He's their captain, and what he says resonates throughout that clubhouse. And so for him to talk about getting back there, for him to talk about the Yankees are better equipped than the Mets, disagreeing with Soto. I think that was the obvious thing for Judge to say.
Teams come to camp. They want everybody to be healthy, firing on all cylinders. Not the case for Giancarlo Stanton. Has elbow pain in both elbows, tennis elbow, something that's lingered since the postseason last year. He was hoping it would have gone away at this point.
Not an ideal situation for the Yankees when you head into spring training, as you said, Bob. If you ask any manager, any general manager, you'll say, what are your goals in this spring training? They will say, to get through it healthy. Well, the Yankees were hit at the beginning of spring training. Cousins has an injury. Stanton has an injury. Wells isn't going to get started until the first week of March in games. And when you think about Stanton and the role that he plays as a DH, he had a really solid regular season for the Yankees last year, played 114 games, but where he was most valuable was in October. He had a great postseason. And I guess what's curious to me, Michael, is he said that he dealt with this in October, still was able to put up those numbers, dealt with that pain, but now you had the whole off season to potentially attend to this or get better, and he comes into spring training and it's lingering.
And he also said, Jack, that the pain was very, very high, so he was dealing with that. The thing that worries me is if you saw him during the postseason, he would get out on the field really, really early and work on things to get his swing right. Well, if you're being bothered by something like elbow pain, you might not be able to put in that time. Now, I think every single season, the Yankees have to go into the season and plan that Giancarlo Stanton's going to play about 110 games. Means he's going to miss 52. But if he starts the season on the IL, and then later on in the season you get, one of those soft tissue injuries that seem to bedevil him, then you're talking about maybe 90 games, and that becomes a little bit of a problem. Last 2 years ago, he had a minus 0.8 WAR. Last year, it was 0.7. So he's not doing it in the regular season. He is making himself worthwhile in the postseason, but this is not something that you could just look away and say it's not a big deal.
Yeah, not an ideal situation. Having said that, because he doesn't play all the regular season games, they have learned to live without him at times. Does that benefit them and Aaron Boone, knowing that they've learned to live without him and figure out how to really best use that DH spot?
I remember manager Joe Torre, when he was shepherding the Yankees to World Series titles, talked about, well, when you have the injury, then you have to pivot, and then you have to figure out how you go forward. And I think with the Yankees, yes, Bob, they have dealt with it in the past, so you start to say, does this mean Judge gets an extra DH day or two during a week? Does somebody like Paul Goldschmidt get some DH time? Ben Rice and Dom Smith are a couple of players on the roster who are now probably going to get at-bats that would have been given to Stanton. I do think if you're looking for a small positive, it is an injury that's happening at the beginning of spring training. In a couple of weeks, we'll see where Stanton stands, so to speak. But the fact that he hasn't swung a bat in almost a month, and listening to his answers, Michael, I thought in his interview he sounded like someone who wasn't expecting to be ready for the opener.
Yeah, and that's concerning. And obviously they're going to be able to find somebody to DH, and they can rotate it, as you said, give guys rest, take them off their feet like Aaron Judge in right field. But they need Stanton because they don't have Soto anymore. So who's going to be backing up Judge that you make pitchers think about pitching around Judge so easily where you might have to pay for it? You take Stanton out. Okay, let's say that Judge becomes the DH, and then you put Trent Grisham in the outfield. Not the same threat. They need Stanton to be a stout contributor this year just to provide that protection to the reigning MVP.
Also making at least a ripple of news this week, Marcus Stroman shows up to camp, takes his physical, misses a couple workouts. Jack, what was sort of your takeaway from that, and what's next for Stroman and the Yankees?
I'm going to repeat a word that Aaron Boone used when he talked about Stroman and what unfolded with his situation. He used the word awkward, and I think there is an awkward element to what is going on with Stroman. He signed with the Yankees to be a starter and was paid like a starter. He's scheduled to make $18 million this year. He did not perform in the postseason for the Yankees last season. Now he comes into this season as the sixth starter in a five-man rotation, knowing that the Yankees have talked about dealing him. And he's looking for the opportunity that he would like to stay with the Yankees and like to be able to continue to pitch for them. Michael, he didn't work out at the same time that other pitchers did. We know that by CBA regulations, he didn't have to be there until February 22nd. I don't think this is akin to the Rafael Devers situation in Boston, because he does not have the level of importance to the Yankees as Devers has to the Red Sox. I just think, as Boone said, it's awkward.
If you want awkward, wait until it's opening day and he's still on the roster and they haven't been able to trade him. What happens then? He said, I am not a reliever and I'm not pitching out of the bullpen. then what happens? Because then it's beyond awkward. Then it becomes a problem. Now, I understand his value to the Yankees because if anybody gets hurt, remember, Garrett Cole got hurt last year in spring training. That's why Luis Hill ended up winning the Rookie of the Year, because he got a chance. So that sixth starter could get some time. But if you're Marcus Stroman and you have a third year on your contract that kicks in at 140 innings pitched, you don't want to pitch out of the bullpen. You'll never get to 140. That's why I said I'm not a reliever, and he has been a starter his whole career. So awkward becomes really awkward if the Yankees are playing Milwaukee and Marcus Stroman has to pitch out of the bullpen.